Well, I want to welcome you today to our reflections on Sunday's sermon. And if you're with us here Sunday, you know that the sermon was all about four little creatures: ants, conies, locusts, and lizards. And it was unique that here was a man who said he didn't have much wisdom, didn't have much knowledge, named Agar, who didn't see much wisdom in himself, but he was able to spot wisdom in these four little creatures, and he told us a lot about what God is like and what we can be like in relationship to him through these animals that he highlighted, the four animals I talked about. And as I was reflecting this week about that, I was thinking to myself, I wonder if there are animals in my world that can communicate the same kind of truth and wisdom of God that Agar found in his world. And of course the answer is yes. We all can find those animals, because the fact of the matter is God has put within almost every creature this innate wisdom that if we find it, we can apply it to our own walk with the Lord or our own spiritual journey. And one of those creatures I would select, I know that Agar selected four that he was aware of, but one of the creatures that I would select, a small little animal, is a bird, and it's a bird called the homing pigeon. Now, I know that they probably weren't around in Agar's day, but they are around today, and they've been very valuable birds. And the uniqueness of this bird is the remarkable ability for it to fly home to where it was launched from. And so even though a homing pigeon is not that remarkable when it comes to its coloring, I mean, there's not bright colors or bold colors. The bird is not much to look at. But the one thing that makes it tremendously remarkable is that it has the ability to know how to get home. Now, that ability became valued during World War I, because it was the homing pigeon that was used by combat troops to communicate back to the command post or to the headquarters. In fact, it was so effective in what they were doing that they were used, 100,000 of them were used by the Allied forces alone during World War I to aid in the communication. Now, there was other means of communicating at that time. I mean, radio was there. The problem was it was in its infancy. It wasn't really helpful. There was a lot of limitations. One of the biggest one was probably the size of the radio itself. I mean, it's hard to believe, but back in 1914, when the war began, radio was so large, I should say it like this, it was so large that it had to be pulled by a horse to the combat zone. And then it could only reach about 1,000 yards at the best. And so if you needed to send a message up to a mile or a mile and a half or 2 miles away, I mean, radio did you little or no good. And so combat communication rested on the wings of these birds. And they were so good at getting the message back to their home that they were 95% effective in doing that. And so troops would carry these birds. I mean, it was wise for them to do that. And they would pen them up in cages, and it was necessary for them to send off a message. They would take a piece of paper and attach it to the leg of the bird, and then they would just send the bird on its way, release the bird, it would fly back to the command post, and with a message that, send reinforcements or send aid or give help. And so that message was sent by these birds. Now, that leads to this amazing story that happened at the end of World War I. It was late November 1918. There was a battalion of United States soldiers that were penned down behind German lines. They were in northern France. They were desperately in need of help. They had faced the Germans. They had lost, of the 100 or 500 soldiers in the battalion, they had lost 306 of them cut down by German fire. There was only 900 or 194 left. And to complicate the desperate situation they found themselves in, they were under artillery fire, but it wasn't fire from the enemy, it was fire from their own side. And in other words, they were in danger of dying because of what we call friendly fire. And so the unit commander realized that something needed to be done, and so he strapped a message to the pigeon's leg, and he sent the pigeon on its journey to tell the artillery unit, redirect your fire and send aid to us. And so as they sent that first bird off, it was just up for a short time, and it was immediately shot down by the German machine gunners. What the Germans would do, they knew how critical it is to have good communications during a battle. And so they actually trained some German machine gunners to spot these pigeons and shoot them out of the sky. And not only that, but they actually made special machine guns to be able to do it. And if that bird was able to fly past those machine guns, they had another backup that they could use, and that was hawks that were trained to hunt down pigeons. And so this was all the things that were there to prevent that pigeon from getting through. And so the first pigeon was sent, but it just got up in the air, flying just a short distance, and was shot out of the sky. The second pigeon, the same thing. They had two pigeons left. They took the second pigeon, and the same thing happened. Redirect your fire. They put the message on, come to our aid, and the Germans shot that bird down as well. Now they only had one pigeon left. It was in the cage. It was a female pigeon. They actually had a name for it. It was called cher ami. It means, if you want to translate it into English, it means dear friend. And it was actually given to the Americans by the British Army. And they put a message on the leg of this pigeon and sent it on its way. Fly home, cher ami, fly home. And the bird began to fly home. But as soon as the bird got over the enemy fire, it too was shot down. And American soldiers watched in horror as they realized that their last hope of getting communication back to headquarters to redirect the artillery fire was now over. And yet, all of a sudden, they saw something amazing. That cher ami, after she had fallen to the ground, she flew back up, and they saw her taking off again. And this time, she was hit by another bullet, and the shot took off most of her leg. I mean, it was only hanging on by a single tendon. And so she was now flying with one leg. Another bullet came and just grazed her head, appeared, and took out her right eye. And now she could only see with one eye. And if that wasn't bad enough, after she got past the machine guns, they saw that a hawk was released, and the hawk was coming after her. And so she was dodging that hawk, and eventually she started to fly up towards the sun, and the hawk was blinded for a moment, and that's when cher ami was able to dodge underneath the hawk and fly up towards home. And she made her way to the command center to stop the artillery bombardment. Because she made it safely to where she needed to go that day, 194 soldiers, American soldiers, were saved because cher ami knew what you and I need to know. And that's this, that there are people who need rescue. And it's our job to get the message through. That's the wisdom that bird gives to me. That we know how to get home to our true home. And we have the ability to help others find the way to get home as well. And we'll face opposition like cher ami did. We'll face resistance like she experienced, but we have the ability to get the message home. Now, here's what I love about the end of the story. Because of her courage, because she was able to endure the bullets that she did and the pain that she endured and fly home in the face of enemy fire, cher ami, the small little homing pigeon, was awarded a medal from the French government. That's how significant her flight was. Now, she lived another year, but she died a year later. And then something unique happened. The Smithsonian Institute showed that they had interest in this little bird. And so they took her body and had a taxidermist preserve it. And today, if you would go to the Smithsonian Museum of American History, you would see her standing there on her one good leg with the American flag behind her. Now, why do I tell you this story? Because cher amin's story reminds me that if we keep our focus on home and we keep our understanding of where our true home is, that God can use us to bring aid to others and help them find their way home as well. God's created all kinds of creatures in our world, hasn't he? All kinds of small creatures as well. And some of them we can learn a lot of great things from. And this homing pigeon is just one of those wonderful animals that God made that gives us the means to see his wisdom at work. And I hope that you found this reflection on Sunday's sermon thought-provoking. If you have any questions, as I tell you, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to send me an email or just see me face to face. And if you have discovered the wisdom of a small creature like this in your world, and you found God's wisdom reflected in that creature, I'd love to hear about that as well. So feel free to send me a message about some small creature that's giving you greater wisdom about how God has a part in our lives. Have a good day. God bless you. We'll see you on Sunday.